Today we're going to be covering Systinternals Autoruns application and how to speed up your computer and be able to disable various applications that are running on it. So my name is Paul Foti. I run the blog OS Attack. I attack at the operating systems. Pretty much one of those things I just do is just cover different things about Windows and just different things in how to fix Windows and make it better for yourself and just really to overall help resolve any issues that you're coming into. So this is a big part of that. Systinternals is just one of those applications that is fundamental now to most techs and how they actually optimize or even fix machines these days and actually improve performance. It is made by Mark Russinovich, who works for Microsoft. It's been one of those applications he's had going around for a long time, very popular in the tech world. So let's dive right into it. We got a lot of stuff to cover today. First of all, you'll notice up across the top is the application menu. Essentially, it's different things that you can be able to do as far as changing what types of information you see, what types of things you can hide and show, and all of that, and your filter options, everything there. Then you've got quick options, will allow you to be able to select an item down below, and then be able to change anything with that. There's a lot of different ways to access that information. We'll get back into that in a little bit. The startup locations are pretty much one of those things where you can see even up above with the tabs there. You can see things like boot execute, image hijacks. Really the big one we like to look at is everything. Just show us everything, show us as much information as possible, and then we'll go from there. Startup item information, entry name, description, where it's starting from. It's pretty much everything about that particular item that we're looking at in this particular category. Now from the top you'll see a couple of different things from the file menu. First of all, save. That allows you to be able to save results, analyze them later, look at them, come back to them so you can compare them tomorrow, 2 weeks from now, 6 years from now. You can be able to look back at those. Compare is a pretty awesome option because it does allow you to be able to compare what has changed in a before and after. Very important if you've got a machine that you're trying to troubleshoot and you're trying to look at and just see what's going on with it, try to figure out, why are things different and what is different. Next, you have Analyze Offline Systems. So this is where you can actually boot into Windows PE, for example, and be able to look at it from there, or you can be able to take a hard drive out and sled it to your computer with a USB hub and be able to look at it and just compare everything that's going on with it and even toggle those items directly from that other operating system. That's a little more advanced for most people. From the entry menu, which is also accessible from the top, you can be able to get different options to actually deal with that particular startup entry. So delete the entry, copy it to the clipboard and be able to save it for later. You can jump to different categories, so you can jump to the entry, jump to the image, which entry means wherever it's starting up from, what's telling it that program can start. Jump to the image, which is the file, whatever program, DLL, anything like that is starting there. You can search online, so it'll actually go out and search the internet for you, tell you more details about that particular item. Then Process Explorer, so if you actually have Process Explorer open, it will actually go to the entries for that item within Process Explorer. So it's a pretty cool option. Properties, pretty simple. You just open up and look at the file properties for that item. Visibility options. Essentially it allows you to be able to hide empty locations, hide Microsoft entries, hide Windows entries, hide VirusTotal clean entries. We'll cover a little bit more about VirusTotal in a bit. You also have a couple other options there as far as scan options, and then of course the font that you're looking at. Show only per user locations is an interesting one because that allows you to be able to see specific things that are unique to a particular user. So instead of just seeing things across the machine as a whole, it allows you to be able to look at just that user. So if there's a problem with only one particular user on a computer, great option to toggle. It really narrows down your focus, allows you to be able to see specifics. Verify code signatures. This is an option I'm a huge fan of. It allows you to be able to have every code signature on the machine for those startup items, basically digitally check to see if it's actually signed. If it's not signed, it's a good thing to look at a little bit closer. Allow you to be able to check VirusTotal is our next one. VirusTotal.com. It'll go through and look up at VirusTotal.com those hashes, again, those signatures of those files, and compare them with VirusTotal database. So in VirusTotal, they will have a database of those different signatures and be able to tell you if a file is malicious, is kind of the idea. Now then, if you have an unknown file, that's where the next option comes in of submit unknown images. You can send that image actually up to VirusTotal and they'll be able to do a scan for you. In the user menu, that's just as it sounds. It's the different users on the computer, and you'll notice that there's things like system, local service, network service. Those are accounts that are actually a part of the operating system as a whole that allow it to function in the way that it does. System, that's system-related stuff. Applications can run as system, so it's an important one to look at. Local service, these are things that are running as a different system account to run local services, as it says here. Kind of think of it, I've got a program like an antivirus running on my machine, and it's running in the background. Oftentimes, that's running as a local service. That way it doesn't depend on a particular user to be logged on. It just actually can be able to do its own thing in the background. Now, the network service, that tends to be a lot more network related. So let's say for example, you were going to go through and have a VPN software. That's usually where they like to run user accounts. So this would be the GRED account, as you can see here, or it could even be something where you can have 7 or 8 different user accounts here, and you can look at each one independently without actually having to log into it. Inside of here, you'll also see a couple of different tabs, since there's all these different tabs across the top. And I'm going to cover them very briefly inside of here. I'm not going to go into detail into most of these just because there are things that are a little outside of the scope for today's discussion. Logon, these are things that actually happen when you physically log into the machine. When you put your username, password, that's the actual application, and that's when it runs. Explorer, these are things that are your start button when you're going to go through and open File Explorer to browse files. That's Explorer. Internet Explorer, these are browser shell extensions, toolbars, add-ons, browser helper objects, or BHOs. Think toolbars. Think things there that are usually causing Internet Explorer to not function. That's usually where you want to look. Services, Windows services, which are system-level applications. So these system-level applications, kind of think antivirus. It's the most common one inside of a service is just to be an antivirus, or things that run at that level. Drivers, kernel mode drivers that are not disabled. So if it's actually physically enabled, this is typically where it will be. So then we get into scheduled tasks that are scheduled at boot or login, actually anytime, honestly. Anything that's scheduled on the machine, this is a good place to look. App Init, you're not going to see it very often unless you're looking at Windows XP or older OSs. It's kind of one of those things that's been faded out because it was a huge vulnerability inside of Windows. So you'll still see it a few places here and there, but it's pretty minimal. Boot Execute. These are native images that run very early in the boot process. You can think things like check disk. It's also where Defender runs. It's where a lot of AVs are starting to run very, very, very early in that boot process. Image hijacks. So image file execution options and command prompt auto starts. Basically, they're programs and things that start with another program and hooking into it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. So you may think like a program like Hijack This. It's kind of the same concept where things hook into it, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're malicious. Known DLLs. These are dynamic link libraries that Windows loads in applications that reference them. So kind of think of it this way. Have a program. I'm looking at a library for a whole bunch of information and how to do something. Okay, I'm going to go grab something out of that library. Generally, most things inside of here are good and beneficial for various programs, but they can be used maliciously. So that's where we're going to go through a little bit of that today and actually talk about it. WinLogon, still very important for the operating system, just not going to see as many options in here with more modern operating system, the way that they're set up. If you're on XP, for example, you'll see a lot of WinLogon stuff. WinSock providers, these are networks, layers and things like that actually integrate into the network protocols themselves. Most common, VPN. So if you have VPN software, it's very common to see something integrated into WinSock layers. LSA providers, so essentially that's just security and things like that as far as how that stuff hooks in. Again, some different Cisco software will run underneath an LSA provider. Network providers, DLLs that provide network services for other protocols such as Novell software, really common. Codecs, various media codecs. Think like I'm going to play a movie and I need to be able to have a codec to be able to interpret that movie or that information. That's what a codec is. Print monitors, these are printer drivers and plugins just to allow you to be able to print. Okay, now we're getting into entry highlighting. The entry highlighting is a really important part of Autoruns. It helps you to quickly identify categories. That's usually the most common one for most people that you'll see is the purple. That startup location in particular will just tell you, hey, this is the category I'm in. This is where it's actually starting from. Yellow means that it just couldn't find it. Doesn't mean it's not there. Doesn't mean you should disable it. What it means is that Autoruns couldn't find it. Pink and red pretty much means that no digital signature is found. It doesn't mean it's malicious again. It just means that it's not digitally signed. You have to pay to digitally sign a software. programs. So that's kind of one of those things. Not everybody wants to get into that. Okay, now that we've reached the end of the slide here, I'm going to go through and I'm going to give you guys a live demonstration of Autoruns, and we'll walk through that a little bit more so you can be able to see a little bit more about how things actually work inside of the program. As we were just talking about, you can be able to see here the different tabs across the screen for the various categories that you want to look at. Print monitors, for example, shows you the printers that are installed. That's the general idea. Everything is still my favorite tab just to look at, just because there's so much information inside of it. And quite honestly, usually about the first page and a half is really where you need to focus. Autoruns also does an excellent job of filtering out most of the things that you don't really need to see. So if we really were going to look at everything, it would be a full 10, 20 pages of different items inside of here. So as we go through and look at this, this is something that is generally made a lot easier for you as you work through it. But if you really want to get even further, you're more than welcome to show more items by going up here to clicking options and unchecking hide empty locations and unchecking hide Microsoft entries. Things that you can do to help you understand of how things flow is still look at them kind of in that tabbed view mentality, but in a single page. So for example, current version run, these are the general things. Most of the items that you're going to see will pop into these categories up here at the top, either current version run, local user run, 6432 run. These are really the areas that you need to focus on when you're looking at. It's usually this top section. So I'm going to just dive through a little bit and show you a couple of the entries that I have here to help you understand it. Very first one, you see there's an item here called everything. Not the everything tab that we're looking at, but it's an application called everything. It doesn't really have a lot of information here. For example, there really isn't much in the Autorun entry or the description or even publisher. It's empty publisher. Now, there are a couple of things we can do here to try to find out if some of these applications are malicious. You'll notice that, first of all, right now, underneath virus total, there's not an entry. There's nothing there. So what we can do is we can go up to options, scan options, and we can do a couple of things. Verify code signatures, check virustotal.com, and also, in my case, submit unknown images, and then rescan. And now what will happen is that as these different entries are scanned by the VirusTotal engine, it will come back and help you to have a greater understanding of whether or not an application is actually malicious, or if it was just a false positive, or really if it's a completely benign file. You can usually tell that by looking over here in this column, the VirusTotal column to the right. It'll say 0 of 56, 0 of 57. As you see here, there's one that actually comes up 1 of 57. Now, really what that means is that out of 57 antivirus engines that have a scan record for that, one of them considers this to be malicious in some manner. It could be a generic thing, it could be it's a false positive. In this particular case, you'll also notice that it does not have a verified signature. So a publisher that Microsoft, for example, shows it's verified, Logitech verified, everything doesn't even have it, it's not verified. If we come down here, NordVPN, not verified. And really what that means is that that application is not digitally signed by an author and that's recognized. So it doesn't mean it's malicious, it just means it's not digitally signed. It costs money to actually sign some applications, and a lot of different companies, especially guys that are just going out and creating a program for their own purpose or random usage, they're not necessarily going to go out and have it digitally signed. In this case, I do know that even though one antivirus engine scans Nord and declares it to be malicious, I know in fact it's actually not malicious. So in here, though, as we go back to everything and we see here, it doesn't tell us much. 0 of 56 engines find it to be malicious, so it's probably not malicious. But to get a little bit more detail on it, you can right-click on a file entry, and you can go down here and actually click this beautiful little button, Search Online. Now, when you do that, it will actually open up your browser and actually help you to be able to search for that particular item. So in my case here, as I go through and look at this, and it says, okay, here's everything. Well, I've got a link. I've clicked on it. It's purple. So it's obviously someplace I've been to, and I did something with it. And if we go into it, and you can actually be able to see then, everything doesn't really tell us much. But if we go back here now and click Home, and it says everything search engine, locate files and folders by name instantly. So now I remember what this is. Now I know, oh, this was the search application I've been using here to be able to find various files. Now, obviously, it's easy if I know this is my own computer, but if this was, for example, a customer's computer, you would have a lot more interest in finding out if something's actually malicious and if it's something that somebody actually needs. This would be a great time to write down that name, write down, hey, everything search engine, do you actually use this? And if not, I'm going to disable it for you. Now, this is where disabling is as easy as unchecking it. Doesn't mean you're uninstalling it. It just means it's not going to start with Windows anymore. So when you reboot your computer, then that application isn't actually starting up. And again, we go down and we look at Logitech Download Assistant. Verified, so we know it's digitally signed, so we know it is actually a Logitech official program, but in my opinion it's a piece of junk, so I'm going to uncheck it. I'm not a fan of things running in the background when they don't need to be. Same thing here, we've got a Realtek Audio Manager. A little on the fence with that one. It's a little bit easier to understand here from the description that it's an audio manager, but if I look here and I just see RTHDVCPL, very cryptic. Now, if I really wanted to look at this and be able to find out even more and say, hey, I want to go look at the file, and I'm going to come down here and we'll do this, for example. This guy, Start CCC, Catalyst Control Center. You can right-click on it, and you can jump to the entry, which will open up wherever on the machine that's opening from. So it could be in the startup folder, for example, in your program files, or it could be inside of your registry, or it could be inside of your task scheduler. There's a lot of different areas inside of the operating system that it could start to. So in this case, it's using this particular key right here, WoW 6432 node, so Microsoft Windows current version run. So it's a really long path. Not everybody remembers that. And that's what makes this so easy for you to be able to see all these different start areas of Windows, because there's a lot of different ways that a program can start up with Windows. So in this particular case, it allows us to be able to look into it. We could modify it. We could do something like that. So if you're getting a startup error, for example, you could come in here and you could go through and say modify and type in the correct path for that program that you want to start. So close that out. Now I come down here and I look at something like Sun Java Update Scheduler. You don't want to disable that. That's one of those ones that is actually important to leave enabled. If you're going to have Java installed on your machine, you need to leave the scheduler installed and updated and allow it to run with Windows, because otherwise you do have a very high risk of getting infected from a zero-day application that's going to go through and install malware on your computer from doing something such as visiting any random website that even has an advertisement installed and then jumps into your computer through a malicious advertisement. So Start CCC. You know, Catalyst Control Centers we were just talking about, I really don't need that. KeyPass, it's a password manager. I use it, I love it, but I don't necessarily need it to start with my computer. And the reason why some of these will do this, and KeyPass is a great example of where they try to start with the computer to make that initial launch of it faster, so it feels like the program is not as slow as it actually is. And they try to do that very often. Adobe Acrobat's a great example of this, where, hey, if I load it all up and let it run in the background all the time, then you won't notice when I actually open and I feel like I opened quickly. But meanwhile, they've taken all of that memory space inside of Windows to actually slow down your computer. Now, Windows 10 actually does a great job of not allowing applications to do that as much, but still, it does happen and it does consume some resources. So, the other ones that you'll see here in a different startup category are NordVPN, Plex Media Server, Steam. I need those to run if I want the functionality from those to be easy. So NordVPN, it would allow me to automatically connect to a virtual private network. Going through Plex Media Server, same thing. It actually allows me to be able to start a media server so I can be able to share off my music and my movies to my computers and my TVs in the other room. Steam, be able to download games. It keeps those up to date. So keep that in mind as you're going through this. Now, some of the other things as you go down here, there's other ones inside of this where context menu handlers. Context menu handler is where you're going to be right-clicking on something and it does something. So let's just say here I'm going to pick a random area. We'll go into primary C and we'll say, okay, here are product keys. I can right-click on it and I can add to an archive. I can compress it. This is a context menu. So it's contextually doing something. In fact, if you click different areas, you get different options. Now all of a sudden AMD Catalyst Control Center, which shows up, which if you come back here to this list, now things will start to make a little more sense, where you see 7-zip. I had that in my context menu. I had a ACE, which if you look over here, AMD Control Panel. That is where that's coming in. So now when I click this, I get that control panel option where it will open up and allow me to be able to change some of my video card settings. Inside of 7-zip, if I wanted to go through and clean that up a little bit, I could remove one of those and it would actually pull it outside of that right context menu. So, and it's as easy, again, same as above, as going through and disabling it. Now for these, generally most of these you'll have to go through and try to be able to restart your computer even in Explorer itself to be able to get it to generate. In this particular case, Autoruns did a great job of refreshing it so that I didn't see the item even after I just quick unchecked it. Again, that allows you to be able to play with it. So like, let's say if I wanted CRC SHA to be gone but leave 7-zip, I could go through these and try to figure out which one it specifically is just by unchecking it and seeing what the end result is. And putting it back is as easy as clicking it again, and there it is again. So same thing inside of these other options too. When you look in the registry, when it's doing this, I'm going to use everything as an example here. I'm going to jump to the entry for all of these. And you see here we have 3 items, everything, Logitech, and Realtek. Now you only see Defender and then Realtek. We've chosen to hide some of these Microsoft entries, which is usually a good idea because you don't want to break anything inside the operating system either, and you especially don't want to disable your antivirus. Now what I'll show you here is that as we go back in, and I'm going to show you that everything's not here, right? We unchecked it, so it moved it out, but I'm going to put a check mark. Then we'll go back here, and I'm going to hit F5 to refresh it on the keyboard, and now it shows back up again. Coming back here, and I will uncheck it from there again. Go back in here, hit F5, and it's gone. Now, where did it go? And obviously the program is doing something. What it does is it creates a subkey, Autoruns disabled. This is where it puts everything that's been disabled, and if you needed to, you could manually copy these out and put them back in the other section. Or as easy as just opening up Autoruns and removing or adding the checkbox back in. So now in this case, as you scroll down, you'll be able to see there are some other options here. So as far as things with Java, for example, Adobe Flash Player Updater. When I was talking earlier too about the different categories, this is a great one where we have Task Scheduler. If we right click on this and we jump to the entry, which again, entry means where the specific application or setting is that's allowing it to start with Windows, and the image is the one where it actually jumps to the actual file, so wherever that startup file is. As we wait for that thing to catch up and be able to show you, I'm going to show you here on everything. If I right click on everything and I jump to the image, it will open up my file browser, sometimes in the background, and it will actually go to that one. So in this case, it jumps to everything wherever that application is installed. So it's a great example too, if you're trying to find out where something is starting from and what it's a part of. That jump to image is a great feature because it allows you to quickly see whatever cryptic name here and where that file is actually starting from. So as we go back into Task Scheduler here, remember as we were just looking at this, let me scroll back down. Adobe Flash Player Updater. You're talking about the Java up above. Adobe Flash Player is the same thing where you want it to be able to update. Now an interesting thing though is the Adobe Flash Player Updater. This, by opening it up and looking at it, you can really see how often things are happening inside of here. In fact, it's very interesting to me because when I look at this and I see Adobe Flash Player Updater, it updates at 4:48 every day. After triggered, it repeats every 1 hour for a duration of 1 day. So essentially what this means is that it's literally running every hour on the hour for an entire 24 hours and then starts back over again, meaning Adobe is actually checking for an update once an hour all the time. So if you're struggling with the performance issue and you notice it always happens at the 48-minute mark or in that same ballpark where you see something slows down all of a sudden, you can go back into your task schedulers and see if there's a task running at that particular time that then is actually slowing down your computer. So as you go back into some of these other options, this is a great place for you just to kind of play with and go back in and look at. But if you're inexperienced and you don't necessarily want to have even this many options shown to you, there are other filter options as well. You can come up here and be able to click Hide the Virus Total Clean Entries, which will do the big duty for you of being able to remove all the stuff that it knows are clean or things that are not believed to be malicious. And it will show you, first of all, the ones that it believes may possibly be malicious, such as the NordVPN, or in the case of yellow, remember we talked about earlier, where the yellow is files that are not found, they're missing, and or in this case, the application can't find it. Doesn't mean it's not there, and it doesn't mean you should disable it, it just means it can't find it. And so here's a great example. If I jump to the entry here and I look at it, it may just be that the file itself is not being shown because of the way that the path is inside of the registry and the inside of the way that it's actually documented, especially if it's being run as a component of something else. That's where then it may basically trick Autoruns into thinking that that file doesn't exist when it actually does. So that's actually a great example of that one right there, of where that's happening. As you look through this though, this is something, don't be fearful of it. It's very easy to put a check mark back in, especially if you've accidentally disabled something, which now all of a sudden disables your keyboard shortcuts, for example. You can quickly be able to put that check mark back in and be able to fix that issue. Now, if you want to see, again, we're going to uncheck this because we like to be able to see the full view, be able to see really what's going on the machine. But there are some other things inside of here too where you just need to play with them, get a little bit more familiar with them. You can browse through the tabs manually. You can say, well, I want to look at just Internet Explorer, find out what browser helper objects or BHOs are installed. You can be able to disable them from here if you're troubleshooting. That's a great thing to do. Play with your scheduled tasks. But overall, don't be fearful of playing with it. This is a great program, and it's a fantastic one to be able to help you out, especially with optimizing your computer and performing that tune-up. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now really quick, we're going to do a couple other things here. First of all, I'm going to show you how to actually analyze an offline system. So assume that you have a hard drive from another computer that you can plug into this computer using a hard drive sled. A sled is just one of those things where you can use that to any time to be able to go out and put another hard drive into this computer just to temporarily access a file, to scan it for viruses, anything like that. In this case, what we're going to use is a sled, and we're going to use it to essentially disable those startup entries on that system so that then maybe it's something preventing it from turning on or from booting. In this case, I have this hard drive. It's actually set right now inside of the F drive on the machine. And you scroll down, you look for the Windows directory, and this is literally just that simple. Once you select the Windows directory of the drive, that's considered Windows, then it will default to the user profile of that directory or that drive, users default. What we're going to do is we're going to actually change that. So in this case, I'm going to go back to my 10 directory, Windows 10, and then I've got a users, and now I have different users that have been on that machine. So it could be any one of these. You could have however many user accounts you want, but in this case we're going to look at the ghost account. After clicking OK, the hard drive will be scanned for startup entries. Now that the hard drive is finished scanning, you can see that there are the different various options here. And same thing, looking at the virus total scan, you can be able to continue to scan through. You can look at the various options. You can be able to toggle them, and when it's done, it will do the same thing of actually saving those directly back to those registry keys or different task scheduler options on that sledded hard drive. So this is something that you can do again and again, and it's the same basic principles over and over again. One thing you will notice, however, inside of this particular sledded hard drive, that there are a lot of files that are otherwise not able to be scanned, that are showing up as the red or pink, is showing that they don't actually have a valid virus signature. It's okay, don't worry about it. In this case, because it's a sledded hard drive, sometimes Autoruns, it will look at that and not be able to find the file and properly be able to verify it. So if that happens, it's not something you need to be overly concerned about. Just be aware that it's not something that's necessarily bad for a sledded hard drive. So now, as you can see, everything inside of Autoruns, there's a lot you can do with it. It's just a very powerful application. There's other things inside of here where if I wanted to go through and even do things like search, let's just say I want to find everything Logitech. Oh, there we go. If I want to find everything AMD, you can be able to do that. There are some things you can be able to do here that are very simplistic, very easy to do, fairly intuitive. Overall, the application is just very, very powerful. Well, thanks for watching today. If you have any questions, you can comment in the chat down below, or you can be able to go out to our website, osattack.com, and be able to comment there. This is just where we have lots of different tutorials, things like that, for how to fix stuff within Windows. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.